reports. They are 700 pages of leaked reports and cables from inside, basically, Iranian intelligence. They were leaked by an anonymous source to an online investigative news organization in the U.S. called The Intercept. The Intercept translated the documents from Persian to English and then decided to share them with the New York Times. And together, those two publications, news orgs, they were able to corroborate the fact that the documents were indeed authentic, although they were not able to identify the source, other than the fact that the source, the anonymous source who communicated with them through encrypted message, said that they were sending these documents in order to show, in this source's words, him or her, we don't know, what Iran is doing in my country, Iraq. So what is Iran doing in his country, Iraq, according to this source? Well, what these pages basically do, it's not revelatory in the sense that we know that Iran has had a long-running campaign to wield its influence, not just in neighboring Iraq, in economic, political, and social spheres of life, but across the region, from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, through Syria, all the way on through Yemen into Lebanon. That's not news. What's news here is the depth and the aggressiveness of this campaign, with Iranian field officers being sent into Iraq and actively trying to co-opt, as these cables put it, co-opt Iraqi leaders to the Iranian cause. It was really a battle of influence with the United States that Iran was raging, and that's what these cables show. In many cases, there were, say, agents, Iraqi agents, working with the United States after the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. The Iranians sought, according to these cables, written by Iranian intelligence officers, they were basically instructions, pay these Iraqi officers to switch sides, not to work for the Americans, but to work for us. And in general, to infiltrate, that was the word used in these cables, to infiltrate all aspects of Iraqi economic, political, and social life. So it's interesting because we know that across southern Iraq, especially, Iran has long had a lot of influence and saw sort of a real opportunity after the U.S. pulled out its troops in 2011 to try to embed itself even more, to entrench that influence. You have Iran's posters of Iran's revolutionary leader hanging in a lot of the holy cities in Iraq South. What these documents do is show the extent and the depth of this campaign in its immediate neighbor, Iraq, to influence policy and to make sure, in a sense, that Iraq remains a pliable client state and does Iran's bidding in the region.
And Iran, too, has seen protests. Tell us about those.
Yeah, well, Iran is, while we're talking about these reports and its regional influence, on the domestic front, we've been seeing over the past few days massive protests over a fuel hike, a petrol hike. We have seen similar protests in other countries when you have a government raising fuel prices. Why is a petrol price hike of 50% in this case such a sensitive thing right now? Well, look at the context. You have it in the context of a essentially crippled Iranian economy, an economy that is more and more reeling under the burden and the weight of the U.S.-imposed sanctions that Donald Trump slapped on the country after he unilaterally withdrew the U.S. from the Iranian nuclear accord in 2015. Since then, there has been a lot of distress and growing discontent being translated into popular protests on the street against the government. So you have really right now a whammy. The Trump administration is likely watching this, and in a sense, you could say the Trump administration has created this problem by imposing sanctions which have raised and spiked the resentment of the population and made them extra sensitive to measures like this. Because here's the irony of the petrol price hike. It's 50%. Now, Iran has some of the cheapest petrol in the world. Cheapest in the world, the fourth largest crude oil reserves, and it's only really to 13 cents a liter, which is what, 52 cents a gallon, which you could say even by American standards, where America petrol is extremely cheap, that makes America's petrol look expensive. But it's very sensitive because it's hitting Iranians like we saw at the Yellow Jackets, but on a different level here in France. Petrol, people need cars, they need it for their businesses, they need it for everyday needs. So anything that affects that price is going and hits their pocketbook at a time like this when savings are vanishing, jobs are scarce, no one knows where their next paycheck's going to come from. That's what's really riling a lot of these Iranians right now. And the irony is the government was hoping by doing this, you might say, well, why'd they raise the petrol prices? Why would they do that at a time when the country's economy is collapsing? They did it, ironically, to try to raise money cash for handouts to Iran's poorest citizens. They wanted to help Iran's poorest citizens, hoping to raise up to about $2.5 billion annually through this petrol increase. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. The Supreme Leader, Khamenei, has supported the move, saying that it was based on expert opinion, and he has suggested that there could be a crackdown looming. He has called the violent protesters thugs. Those were his words. So what will happen? We have to watch this space. We do know that Iranian police have used heavy-handed tactics against economic protests in the past, 2018, 2017, and around disputed elections back in 2009.